All right, guys, I think we're now live on the sites. I want to welcome everybody to our weekly Nomberg Law Live. We do this every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. I want to welcome everybody in and thank you for your continued support, comments, watching, everybody who participates. We really appreciate it here at the firm. And I have my friend Saul Gruber from North Miami Beach is with me this morning. Good morning, Saul. It's good to see you,
Morning.
bud.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And guys, as you guys know, we come to you with different conversations with interesting people in their areas of expertise. And because we're living in this pandemic world, we really have kind of a neat thing for folks who are in the law, people who are involved in trials or just enjoy that type of subject matters. But what we're talking about are jury trials in a Zoom world, is what I'm calling it. And Saul is one of the leading trial consultant experts in the country. So we're going to kind of in a minute dive into that stuff. But before we do, Saul, tell us a little bit about your company and yourself and how your world is these days.
Sure, would love to. First, I go back. I'm originally from Philadelphia and worked as a trial lawyer in New Jersey for a little over 30 years. Then moved to Miami after some personal issues up, and I decided, you know what? I love trying cases. There's nothing more fun as a lawyer, at least for me, is trying cases, and decided to use some of that experience in helping lawyers all over the country get their cases ready for trial. One of the lucky things I had back in New Jersey was when I first started, I had a mentor and someone to tell me, well, this is where you stand. You know, this is how you put things together, and this is how you don't look completely foolish when you're in court. Although we still look foolish when we're in court, at least I had somebody to tell me what not to do. And one of the things I noticed is a lot of people are now hanging their shingle out and are going in and just running and trying cases, which is great, but there's a level of ineptitude that there has to be in your first 10 to 15 trials. You just can't help it. And that's where we come in. We help them out. We help people put their case together. I handled nursing home cases for 30 years. So we have another portion of our consulting company that helps nursing home lawyers, which is really a specialized field, put their cases together. So pretty much have fun. I get to travel all over the country before the pandemic, help people do what I love and not have to worry about, taking the deposition, having the judge holler at me, having those deadlines that make us all lose sleep every day. So now I'm down here in Miami, but Florida just opened. I don't know if you heard, we're completely safe now in the state of Florida. Don't let all those new COVID infections tell you anything differently. Don't worry about the schools. We're wide open now. We can eat wherever we want. We don't have to wear a mask. It's exciting down here.
Exciting would be one way to describe it.
Yeah, I'm ready to rent a hazmat suit to go out now because everybody's running around. They just opened our bars like 5 days ago. And in Fort Lauderdale, there's this world famous elbow room, right? If you go to Fort Lauderdale, you have to go there. It was packed. When I say no social distancing, people were hanging on top of each other. So we're getting ready for the new wave.
Oh gosh, well, you're just making me a little nervous just hearing that. But the world that you're in, the consulting for trials, preparing for different things that go on in a jury, is such a unique specialty. And your experience with with nursing homes and other types of cases, I'm sure brings a neat perspective. But if you're pre-pandemic going all over the country, I know there's commonalities to every trial.
Yeah, there really are.
But with every jurisdiction and venue, you obviously there are different rules based on whatever state or whatever court that you're in. But my question,
right,
Saul, now that we're in the pandemic world, I know you've had a couple of trials and experiences. Yep. I'm curious, how did it work? How were you able to do your job? Just kind of take us through that experience a little bit.
My job was much easier to still do. But the trial lawyer's job, I think, is much harder now. Because, a lot of trying cases really is a feel. I mean, everybody thinks you just have to be a good actor and you stand up and you just shoot from the hip. What they don't realize is for every half an hour opening statement somebody gives, they've prepared, 70 hours to do that, to make it look so relaxed. So that part we're able to still do. But once you're in the courtroom, we were just had a week-long trial in Ohio, and there's plexiglass in front of the jury. There's both separating them individually and separating them from you. So already now there's a barrier between you and the jury. And remember, the jury is who you have to connect with, right? What we think as lawyers, who cares, right? We're already jaded. We look at cases completely differently. There's a large plexiglass screen in front of the judge and where the witness is. The problem is, you and I probably both have our microphones now that are great for amplification. The microphones in a courtroom don't amplify at all more often than not. They just record. So the witness thinks they're speaking loudly because they go like this, and they're not. All they're doing is it's hitting the plexiglass and coming back. So it's hard for the witness now to connect with the juror. So it presents all those type of problems, which I think are some of the most important issues that we have in trying cases, is that connection that if we're a lawyer and we're showing some vulnerability when we're asking for money from a jury.
And it's not just the visual aspect of it. You can smile and see the response, if any. You can see what the different jurors are doing and paying attention. But
sure.
But what I'm also envisioning, I haven't had this experience, but I'm also envisioning is being able to the audible aspects of it, and how often. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat
exactly
that?
Right.
So the jury trial that you had in Ohio, that was an in-person
yes.
experience.
I don't think, I think the theory of Zoom trials that everybody was jumping in on, I don't know that they're going to be something that we see. I think we're able to, as we get a little bit deeper into the pandemic, I think we're going to be able in many states to have in-person trials. They're going to be a little bit different. They're going to be in larger rooms. People have to be separated to a certain extent, but they're able to do that if we're able to go out to a restaurant and eat indoors, which we are now in certain states, then we should be able to do those trials. And what I've advised all my clients is the real scary part, and we're focus grouping this dramatically all over the country, is who your jurors are going to be. So for all the lawyers, or really for anybody, I mean, you're reading about the Breonna Taylor case right now. Now that's a grand jury, which is different. But at the end of the day, you want to have a jury, quote unquote, of your peers. And I don't see that happening right now. I see that courts are bending over backwards, and rightfully so, to eliminate certain juries, right? They're going to say, if you're at all nervous about COVID, you don't have to show up. Or if you're at all upset that you have to wear a mask and think it's your constitutional right not to wear a mask, you don't have to show up. But what I'm seeing is a much more right-leaning jury, much more conservative jury pool than we normally have. And we normally have a pretty conservative jury pool. But from what we're looking at, we're losing about 30 to 40% of the actual jurors that would be there in a non-pandemic era. And most of those that we're losing are probably those that are more likely to give larger pain and suffering awards and more likely to understand the plaintiff's case a little bit better. That's where I see the real danger right now in trying cases.
Going back into that Ohio courtroom, you were describing the plexiglass and the division between the different people who constitute the jury, the trial itself.
Right.
But what about the jurors themselves? How were they spaced, or were they?
They were spaced where there was at least one seat in between all of them. They wore their masks, and there was additional plexiglass. So it kind of also eliminates, because remember, some of the things you want to do with juries, you want them to come together, and it does have an effect on bringing them together. And it certainly did in that trial. We adapt, and it may not be the best right now, but it's better than not having trials at all.
Well, now my practice admittedly is a non-jury focus of our practice with work comp and the like, but we do have some jury type cases with our automobile accident or personal injury cases. We haven't had in Alabama any in-person jury trials just yet. We've had several Zoom judge trials and evidentiary hearings. Those are much, I wouldn't say easier, but they're now becoming a lot more normal, with Zoom and the other competitors sharing your screen to be able to show your evidentiary submissions. That has become not routine yet, but it's getting there.
And it probably will continue to be routine because it's easier for the judges.
It's extremely easy. They've created a protocol where you have to submit online all of your evidence that you potentially are going to use. I mean, those are becoming fairly standard. And so we've been able to practice law, albeit adjusted at the last 6-7 months. But I'm just envisioning that if they tried to do, and I want to say somewhere, maybe in Texas, I'm not sure what state.
There's been a couple. There's been one down here in Florida. There's one in Texas. I think there was one in California, and it was a lot of issues with regard to getting the jurors to pay attention.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I did read about at least one that I saw. I think it was the Texas one, but that was one of the least of their, not the least, that was one of the issues, was just getting people to pay attention.
Sure. The problem is right now I'm sitting at my desk, right? My phone's right here. My keyboard's over here. And at any moment, in this crazy world, I'm tempted to go like that and look at my phone.
Right.
And if I'm in court, you can't if you're a juror, because if the judge sees it, he's going to go crazy and your phone has to be turned off. That's the problem with, I think, the remote working and the remote trials. I think, part of trying a case is when the judge comes in, you stand up. You just do. Are you going to do that on Zoom? When you're about to put something into evidence, you're standing up, right? If there's a witness, whether it's a jury trial or a judge trial, you stand up. You want to cross-examine them. If there's a jury there, you want to go by the jury in certain questions. You want to make your point without, with trying to be subtle. You want to do something with body language. That all goes away on Zoom. So personally, I would rather us sanitize the courtroom to a certain extent, adapt, even if it takes us a little bit longer to get our cases to trial, but at least if we're in the courtroom, we still have that way of looking at each other and talking to each other. Because if trials are just going to be on Zoom, I get the feeling that the days of true, especially true pain and suffering, are going to be over. So especially in courts where you can ask for a certain sum of money. I've never practiced in a court where I can try the case and then say to somebody, and that's why we're asking for X. But in those cases that you are, if you don't have that connection, if you don't have that thing with the jury, and you ask for $20 million in a horrific case where you have a future pain and suffering for 40 years and they're paralyzed, all of a sudden that 20 million is a lot of money if you don't have that connection. So I have a lot of fears about that.
Well, it's and what each of the jurors, even though they're not supposed to bring this to as part of their decision making, the new world, everyone is suffering. Everyone has had either a family member or a friend or a neighbor who has been affected by the pandemic, by COVID-19.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's interesting. We did a series of focus groups online to kind of test that out, to see how COVID affected people's thought process. And I haven't found that it dramatically changed their thought process. I think it makes them a little less sympathetic if your complaint is you can't bowl anymore and you can't go out dancing and those type of things. But in the serious cases, we haven't found yet where it's dramatically affecting the people's thought process. What we found is, unfortunately, a lot of the people who would be more sympathetic with the plaintiff's case just aren't going to be jurors. We found that more, but I haven't found that. And I know there's AAJ, the American Association for Justice, the plaintiff trial lawyers, just did a study with a grant, and they're going to present their findings, I think, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So if you're a trial lawyer, well, first of all, if you're a trial lawyer and you don't belong to AAJ, that's crazy. Right. You really should. Right. But now you really should, because for a very reduced price, you're going to get their findings. And I'm really curious to see what they come up with, because I haven't seen a dramatic change. Now, granted, they've been tracking it differently because I've been doing focus groups for specific cases as opposed to specific issues. But we'll see. The next year is going to be interesting.
It is in many ways. And guys, I'm talking with Saul Gruber out of North Miami Beach. We're talking jury trials during the pandemic, whether the few that have been attempted online, truly online, or now that courthouses are trying to adapt. Most of these courthouses are old. The sound systems are terrible. They all need updating, at least the ones I travel around to.
Yes.
through the state. A lot of them are awesome stately buildings and have great histories, but that doesn't necessarily mean they equate to the modern world's need. That if you're going to have a jury trial, how do you retrofit this?
Well, that's an understatement. I mean, some of these gorgeous, I've tried cases in a lot of states, and you go to some of the older, and in a lot of counties, in the older counties, and the courtrooms are absolutely breathtaking. You walk in, it's like something from The Verdict. Yeah. And it's beautiful. And then you realize, okay, I have to set up televisions for everybody. I have to do all my documentary evidence. We don't just blow up boards anymore. Everything is high tech, and there's one plug. They're completely not set up for that at all. The acoustics are horrific. You stand in it. There's one place in Camden County in New Jersey. If you stand, it's got beautiful rounded ceilings, but if you stand right in the middle, you could hear everything that everybody says, even whispers. And you're like, whoa, what's happening? You need to know that. But I don't think we put enough money into our courts is what's happening. When you look all over the country, the budgets for everything are cut. I mean, I guess anybody you would have on your show would be saying that about what their profession is. But I mean, we really need to put much more money in the courts, and it's just not there. But that's what they have to do. They have to retrofit the courts now for the new pandemic era. I don't know how they're going to do it.
I don't know where each county is going to be able to get their money. I don't know if the Administrative Office of Courts in the state of Alabama has that kind of money, but I'm in Birmingham, our largest city. So we have a great courthouse. We have judges who have quickly gotten on board with trying to figure all of this out. My brother was at the courthouse last week, and he felt very safe, if you will, of the protocols that are in place. Oh, just as a side note, have you ever been into a courthouse or a courtroom that has a jail holding cell in the courtroom itself?
Oh, yeah. In the courtroom?
Yes, in the courtroom itself. We have one in South Alabama that it has to be seen. It's awesome. But that was just something I thought of. But it's when you go into these small courthouses, these small counties throughout the state of Alabama, and I'm sure all over the country, some of these courthouses are very small. There may just be one courtroom. So I don't know how they're going to do it, but I know it's being addressed and has been. But,
it's so crazy because not only is it being addressed, but it's not even being addressed statewide, right? Because each county in every state is so different.
Yeah.
And then if you try cases, and anybody who's watching or listening, if they're trying cases, they know that in the same county, the trial could be conducted completely different depending on what judge you're in front of.
Oh, sure.
And some judges, it's the nature of the beast. Some judges are going to say, this COVID stuff, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. And others are going to take incredibly serious precautions. And that could be courtrooms right next to each other. So then you have either jurors, witnesses, or lawyers that are going to feel uncomfortable. So if we have a fear of COVID or a concern, and you're in front of a judge who thinks you're crazy for it, it's just another problem. And it's just another issue that we're going to end up having.
Have you seen in your consulting with plaintiffs' attorneys where there's a real mindset change on the type of case they now want to bring to jury, or are they waiting to see maybe we'll try it in a year from now or 6 months?
I have clients that have done everything they can to put off trials for another 6 months to a year, and the courts in most cases are saying it's okay because most of the cases that I get brought in on are not 2-day motor vehicle accident cases.
Right.
They're normally longer med mal trials, nursing home cases, and just the motions in limine on those cases as it relates to pandemics, as it relates to heroes work here, as it relates to all those things are going to be really high, much higher than they were before. So right now, most of my clients are playing the waiting game. I will tell you that Brendan Lupitin, who's a lawyer in upstate New York, just tried a case and got a $10.8 million verdict. And I'm going to have him on my podcast at the end of the week. I'm sure that won't drop until December, but I'm really looking forward to talking to him just about the whole experience and how he found it. But I think if you have a case that is a smaller case, your first instinct is going to be, let me just get it over with. And I think that's right. But I think you have to try differently than you would have 2 years ago. I think you have to frame it differently. I would do a focus group, and you don't have to hire me to do that focus group. You can do that yourself. It probably wouldn't cost you more than $1,000 to do it, but at least you can get some information, and you have to work a little harder, I think, to prepare that case and frame it the right way, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
One of the things that I'm hearing from friends here in town who do try jury trials is once they start to try to pull together a voir dire, just getting people physically to the courthouse is going to be a lot more difficult than in times past, which is already a difficult thing in and of itself, getting enough people. They're going to have to double or triple the pool that they send out the notices to.
And remember what I said earlier, and the pool, they're actually reducing the pool. Exactly what you said. And it's concerning because I think you're more likely to get a pool. I don't want to say that has an agenda, because I don't mean it that way, but has certain anti-tort or tort reform ideas that they don't even realize they have. And then you're going to have judges who aren't going to be giving you your for cause challenges as easily because they don't have a big pool they can pull from.
Right.
So it's just going to really, that's the biggest thing I'm worried about. What jury am I getting? So if I'm in New Jersey and I get 8 jurors and I need 6 to actually deliberate, but I only need 5-1 on any question, that's one thing. But if I'm in a jurisdiction where I need 12 and it has to be unanimous, which is a lot of jurisdictions, I think it's going to be really problematic. I think you're going to see a lot of, we call them no cause. You're going to see a lot of defense verdicts because there's a couple of people that just say absolutely not, because we couldn't pick them off.
Now let's take all of what we've just talked about and add in that we're not only in an election season, but we're 2 months from the election in what many are calling the most divisive election potentially in the last at least 50 years. So I know that has to be yet another factor.
You know what really scared me is when, in my opening statements, and they were just about all nursing home cases or med mal cases, I would stand up and I would say, you're going to hear the defense use this word, comorbidity. And normally it was a word that nobody in the jury ever heard. And I'd say, I didn't really know that was a thing until this case. And I go through this whole thing to try to undercut their defenses. Well, 3 weeks ago, all we heard from everybody who's never heard comorbidity is, well, look at all the comorbidities. That's what's causing the death. It's not the COVID, it's the pre-existing comorbidities. Right. And I thought to myself, oh my God, if I have a case, even an automobile case, where I have a herniated disc, super bright, of a 55-year-old person, right? We all have back problems.
Right.
I'd be scared to death to all of a sudden talk about pre-existing conditions. They were non-symptomatic, asymptomatic, and now this aggravated it. I mean, I don't know what people are going to think because of that. So as divisive as we are, I just cringed when I saw all that information come out. And we actually talked with one of my clients. The judge said, we can push this to October, and you'll get a trial date, or you can put it off to next year. We talked for a lot of hours because there was a lot of money in this case in costs. And we said, because there was such a big thing about the pre-existing condition, because of the election, we didn't want to go forward. We said, let's just wait, because there'll be a lot less people thinking about pre-existing conditions then.
Yeah, it's not to dive too deep into politics, but who knows what it's going to look like the days, weeks, and months after the election,
Yeah.
regardless of which way you
Or
vote, or assuming that people
regardless of who
vote.
wins, it's
Yeah,
going to be the rest of this year after the election is going to be very interesting.
yeah. And
Uh,
then however many weeks or months, however, whatever the timetable is for a vaccine to not only be established, approved, and then spread to people starting to take it, we're still looking at many, many months of having to deal with the pandemic. It's just not a magic, oh, we have a vaccine. All right, everybody go crazy. It's going to take a long time for all of that to
there's no question. And for
set into
people like
place.
us who are worried about, taking it out of the social area and putting it back a little bit into the jury area, I don't think we get to any normalcy until late 2022.
Mhm.
And I don't know what the normalcy will be. It'll be something, but I don't know what it will be. I mean,
Well,
and
let's fast forward to a year from now. Is Carson Wentz still under center, or is Jalen Hurts now the man?
I cursed that pick. I'm not gonna lie, and I still curse that pick because
Well, guys, that's the end of our show for today.
yeah,
So
I still curse that pick just because they needed so much more than a quarterback. I like Carson Wentz. Last year, he was a lifesaver.
yeah,
Um, I, remember when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they had Frank Reich as their offensive coordinator,
hmm
and Doug Peterson was the head coach.
hmm
Frank Reich, that was his offense that won the Super Bowl. And I don't know if you remember, but the New England coach was supposed to take the Indianapolis job
hmm
and then took it and then bailed.
hmm
Then they went to Frank Reich. So I'm like, really? Because if he had taken that job, I think we still have Frank Reich as the offensive coordinator. I'd like to see a new offensive coordinator. I'd rather see a coaching change than get rid of Wentz.
Well, and what we're talking about, guys, is Saul's originally from the Philadelphia era, but now he's in North Miami Beach, and I don't think he's pulling for the Dolphins. And
Yeah,
the it's and you, that we're speaking of the Dolphins and the
he.
Eagles. That's two of the quarterbacks originally from Alabama.
That's right.
Who I now I'm not a big NFL guy. We won't talk football much here, but I want to see Jalen and I want to see Tua just get a shot, see what they can do.
Well, he'll get a shot, I
You
think,
know,
because I think Philly is a tough place to play. I mean,
oh
it's
sure,
we are good fans, and we will let you know what we think every second of every day.
guys, go
Uh,
look up the story, the famous story. I don't know how true it is about the fans booing Santa Claus many decades ago.
Now I can't show any people my video. I
Yeah,
can't show this video to any of my friends.
that's funny.
We're a tough group. We're no tougher than anybody else. I mean, but maybe a little tougher. But I don't know what's going to happen. They paid a lot of money for Carson Wentz, right? They gave
Yeah,
him
and they're
that large
stuck with him at
contract,
least through the end of next year, I believe.
right?
But
And he's not had a good year. But I'll tell you what. I don't know if you watched the game on Sunday where they played to a tie. Um, why they didn't run the ball more
mhm.
during the game is beyond me. Miles Sanders was running the ball pretty well, averaging 7 yards a carry. Then they just stopped. And when you do that, and especially against a Bengals defense, which
Yeah.
stinks,
Well,
but
Saul, I could talk NFL and football with you for forever, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your expertise today about what
it's
you're
my.
seeing in the world of jury trials.
Let me give you one takeaway that everybody has to do. If you're going to do anything in front of a jury, do yourself a huge favor. Do a focus group. And a focus group could be something as simple as, putting an ad in Craigslist, having 8 people come into your office and just talk to them about the case. You're going to be shocked at what you hear, and it will make a significant difference in how you present the case. And framing the case is really what matters when you try a case.
You guys, don't just take people from your office or your
Yeah,
building.
no,
Take people
no.
who are not affiliated with your practice or know you at all.
And I think it's that important. I think, if I was still in the litigation firm, we would be having our focus group Fridays, where once a month we have a focus group, whether we have a trial coming up or not, and you just find out things that people think. You could frame a deposition that way. That's really where litigation is right now. You have to do that.
Saul, how can folks reach out to you? I'm going to put in the comment section the link to your website
Okay.
But if folks want to reach out and talk about this or potentially hire your firm, how do they
You
do that?
can, there's 1,000 ways to get us. You can go to our webpage, grubertrialconsulting.com. You could email me at saul@grubertrialconsulting.com. You could always call us. Our number's right there, 305-414-1600. And even if you don't want to hire us, you go to our YouTube channel. I think you'll find some really interesting things there. We do a weekly video, either a trial tip or a nursing home minute. And then we have a monthly podcast saying the jury thinks what. So finding me is very easy. And we help everybody. We help the people who hire us in a different way. But if anybody has a question, I'm sure we can answer it and help you out.
And for folks who love podcasts like I do, I think that's my main form of entertainment. It's not TV anymore, Netflix,
Right.
so forth. What's the name of the podcast?
The Jury Thinks What? With a question mark. And it's available everywhere you get podcasts.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Saul, thank you for your time today and talking us through an interesting time in the legal profession.
Thanks.
Sure.
I appreciate it, Brian. It's good talking to you again.
My pleasure. And guys, as we do each week, Nomberg Law Live is each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. And we hope you guys have a fun and safe week. And we'll catch you another time. Be well.